Chapter 47 Crown of Bones. The first thing Raelif did that showed any sort of conscious thought since he'd arrived in Illithor was to remove the glamour that hid his true self. While he had no intention of being seen by his sister, things happened. So, in order to lower the possibility of her knowing he was hiding amongst the Arave, he would look as Kindrethi as possible. Even carrying the Adiva with him was a risk. She could sniff out enchantments and what they did a mile away, but he couldn't leave the delicate yet powerful ruby and gold enchanted amulet anywhere in Illithor. Do I think it will get stolen? By whom? The ghosts? And yet, his sister was here. Vex was undoubtedly here. Others might be here. And the Adiva could call to things he didn't want to find it or him. Besides, he might need to beat a hasty retreat to Earth. It could be morning by the time he returned, and he'd need its protection against the sun. Do I really think that I'm going back to Earth? Am I hanging on to the idea that I can return to that life? He was. He had to admit that he most certainly was hoping, praying, begging to return to it. Nothing had ever felt so precious to him before. When he'd left his existence as a night elf, he hadn't felt even a fraction as much regret as he did now, despite having to leave behind his position as Vex's nephew, his great wealth, and the prestige of his family and his library. All right, he missed his library. He really regretted leaving that. But the rest of it? Not at all. Finley would understand my pain. Good gods, where is Finley in all of this? Please let him not be anywhere near Hera. If Darkassin showed disdain for Finley, he was certain that Hera would hardly notice crushing the boy underneath her heel. Gods help him, but I think he's better off with Vex than her. As the glamour dropped from him, he swore he felt his skin tingle, as if there had been a physical block between himself and Illithor that was now stripped away. He nearly gasped as that tingling did indeed race over his body from head to toe. His eyelids nearly fluttered shut with the pleasure of it. He felt incredibly well. He breathed deep. His lungs seemed to finally fill for the first time. His spine straightened and he stood taller than before. Magic thrummed within him. He could imagine in that moment simply waving his hand and causing anything to happen. He felt godlike. Why did Vex leave here? How could he abandon such power? Our bloodline belongs here. This is our home. My home. But then he shook himself. Whatever Vex's reasons for leaving, they were his alone. And no one would be allowed to restore Illithor to its former brilliance unless it was Vex himself. And how could a possible traitor such as himself be a part of that? He couldn't be. But still, he had never felt such a connection to any place before. A bed was a bed to lay his head. Home was something that moved with him. It was never static. But Illithor? This was different. It's more than I ever imagined. Gods, I will never forget this place. It will never leave me. It will haunt me to the end of my days. And those may be coming to a close very soon if I am not careful. He drew his senses into himself as tightly as possible, closing himself off to the power that Illithor seemed to offer. Immediately, he felt its loss. He went from godlike to normal. Well, normal for him anyways, in a moment. He blinked and let out an almost sigh of grief. How could Vex have left here? He wondered again. Whatever caused him to do it must have been unbearable. I do not think I should linger here any longer than necessary. If I do, I might not be able to leave. For a moment, he could imagine himself walking, as if in a trance, amongst the wonders of Illithor. A dreamy expression would be on his features, even as no food or drink passed his lips or sleep closed his eyes. He imagined himself simply drifting about forever in this place and never noticing as he wasted away. He swallowed hard. Think of Aquilin. Think of Finley. Think of delicious wine and good food. For God's sake, remember life. He shook himself, and the feeling retreated, but it was still there in the dim recesses of his mind. He would see what his sister was up to, and then he would go after Finley and the others. He would be focused on his task. He would not stay here. He would not lose himself to whatever fell magic this was. Poisoned chalice, indeed. Raelif glided along the side of the Temple of the Stag, as he was now calling it in his mind. He would not be going through the front door if he could help it. He was not suicidal, after all. His eyes scanned the high, slick walls of stone for a door or window or two, or a simple breach in the stonework that might let him in. There were high rectangular windows at the very top of the temple. He imagined that they would allow in the golden and purple light of the city, painting the interior in welcoming, mysterious colors. But he'd likely be seen if he climbed through them. No, better to try around back. He highly doubted that the priests entered through the front door. He would get inside via their entrance. While the Temple of the Stag was up several steep flights of steps, likely so that it rose above its neighbors, whoever had built it had not ignored the area around it. There was a pathway that meandered through glowing blooms on either side of him. Purple, bobbing flowers of no known name to him brushed his shoulders. Their long stamens left a glittering dusting of orange pollen on his tunic. He brushed a finger over the dust and sniffed it. He licked a few particles of the stuff up, and his eyes widened. A narcotic. Interesting. Used in their rites? Or perhaps it was to cause worshippers who walked even near the temple to fall into a trance. He had magical enchantments that kept him free of such traps. The Kindreth were keen poisoners. He'd been trained since a boy to keep any foreign material from affecting him without his consent. Seeing half a dozen food tasters die in a year when his mother had gone up against some of the powerful clans had reinforced that lesson. So, though the pollen was thick in the air and the sweet scent of it clung to his nostrils, he suffered none of its ill effects. His father had willingly ingested a portion of milky dead nettle that caused him to lie insensate sometimes for days and have strange dreams. He claimed that it inspired his spell work, but Raelif had been convinced it was just an escape from his existence. His wife, Raelif and Hera's mother, had long lost whatever love she'd had for him. Raelif doubted she'd ever had much respect. And while his father had been thought a prodigy when young, his magical achievements had seemingly sputtered out. For as much as Raelif did not want to imitate the bloodthirstiness and callousness of his mother, he also didn't want to follow the indolent and dead-end path of his father. It was what urged him ever forward to learn more, practice more, seek more, more and more and more. Only when he'd met up with Aquilin had he relaxed slightly in his search of increasing his power. He'd actually begun to enjoy magic again. The way Finley's face had lit up with wonder and joy when he transformed into Gran had him smiling even now. Such happiness with the essence of magic had been lost to him back then. And now I am a different person, but may have to leave everything again. I have no idea where I will go. Could I throw myself at my uncle's feet and ask for forgiveness for even the appearance of betrayal? Beg Declan to take me under his protection? Either idea sounds hollow, especially if Aquilin turns his back on me. He shook himself. Forward, ever forward. The purple flowers with their narcotic payload were not the only ones on his path. There were small red flowers with 3 leaves that bloomed from crawling vines that covered trellises that arched over the pathway. When he looked at them carefully, he saw the petals widen and the stamens, which looked awfully sharp, twitch. He was careful not to brush against them. But despite all of the danger that this flora could potentially wreak, He found himself enchanted by the pathway with its different colored stones that wended its way through a forest of flowers. Small yellow flecks of light rose up from the earth and danced lightly on the wind. They swirled rapidly with his presence. Beautiful, he thought. I believed Illithor to be so many things: a place of power, a keeper of secrets, a location of destiny. But never did I consider that it would be so very beautiful. Maybe because the Kindreth kept moving ever deeper, their cities now were more utilitarian. This type of elaborate and thoughtful gardening and decoration took time and effort. Why do those things when one might leave everything behind at a moment's notice as the Kindreth marched again and established at another base deeper still in the Underdark? Here there was a sense of permanence. The Kindreth had been here for ages and planned to be here for ages more with no end in sight. There was no sense that they ever had intended to leave. And Vex had left things here sealed in amber. At any moment, Rayleigh could imagine the city bustling with life. He wondered if the food inside people's homes was still fresh and ready to be eaten. This sense of timelessness, or rather of time held still, was overwhelming. A sleeping city, waiting for a king to kiss her and bring her back? A yet deeper sense of melancholy flowed over him. Vex had seen and done so much. His knowledge was likely as deep as the Underdark. But other than a few stray words in his millennia of life, Rayleigh had never spoken to him. My own uncle, the elf who has always held my fate in his hands, and we have nary said a word directly to one another, never been in a room alone together, never even touched. He remembered as a boy going to the royal court for some function or another. He'd been within 10 feet of his uncle. Vex had been sprawled on his throne, a beautiful if imposing figure who looked more like a carved statue than an elf. But then his red eyes had flickered and landed upon Rayleigh. He'd been staring quite hard at his uncle, fascinated and afraid of him. Then Vex smiled and waggled his eyebrows. Delighted, Rayleigh let out a stifled laugh, knowing even then that laughing too loudly would have been a bad idea in such a place. His uncle gestured for him to come near. Rayleigh took a step towards him, but then his mother's hand, claw-like in that moment, slammed down on his shoulder. Her fingers had dug into his shoulder until pain had caused him to see black. She kept him by her. She didn't allow him to go to Vex. And the Night King sighed and looked away from him. If you want more fantasy from me, you should check out Cinders and Ashes. It's my high fantasy book series, loosely inspired by Cinderella, except that it's a 6-book series, so there's much more to it than a poor boy winning his Prince Charming. There are many similarities to the Night Prince, too, including secret heritage, morally ambiguous characters, complex relationships, and misunderstood magical powers. What can I say? An author likes what she likes, but the storyline itself is different, and so is the cast of characters. Cinders and Ashes is a completed series in Kindle Unlimited, and also as audiobooks read by Edward Fox and Hannah Hart. The link to the series is in the notes. Afterwards, his mother had beaten him, and while she'd told him what a fool he was. Hadn't he understood what would have happened to him if he'd gone to Vex? He would be dead. Foolish, stupid boy. And he'd believed her for a very long time. But later, when he knew her better, when he understood her as someone other than as a child knows a parent, he'd wondered if that was true. What if he had shoved her hands away? What if he'd gone to Vex? Would his uncle have killed him? Or would he have taken Rayleigh under his wing? That seemed to fly in the face of all he knew or had been told about Vex. But his own sense had been that he'd missed an opportunity. He hadn't thought of that moment in hundreds of years, but now it was so strong that the regret tasted fresh on his tongue. First, a desire to simply wander Elithor forever, and now regrets about Vex. Maybe the city, or the Pollen, is having an effect on me. I must stay focused. He came to the end of the building and followed the path around to the back of the temple. He stepped through a final arch of those red flowers and really did gasp this time. Though many of the buildings in Ilithor were practically built cheek to jowl, this temple had a back garden, a magnificent back garden. More narcotic plants in all their dizzying glory. Oh, and so many poisonous ones, but lovely, so lovely. The garden sprawled out in front of him, dozens of winding stone paths interspersed with elaborate displays of flowers. And in the center of it all was another stag, proudly staring ahead as if gazing into the horizon, into destiny. A bubbling fountain surrounded the stag's hooves. Fish as large as his hand and colored violet, orange, green, and blue flitted underneath the surface. What is this place? Who is worshipped here? The hunter. His sister's voice rose up behind him. He was already turning. He had sensed her just a moment too late. It was always that way between them. He spun around and looked upwards. There were two sets of curving stairs that led from the temple down into the garden. She was standing at the top of the nearest one that emptied out by his feet. She smiled down at him. Brother, it's been too long, Hera said, her hand lightly landing on the stone railing. He gritted his teeth. So much for not getting caught. So much for spying on her. Damn it, why was he always flat-footed around her? Sister, you look as beautiful as always, he lied. She let out a tinkling laugh, and her free hand rose almost self-consciously to the crown of antlers. Hera was not beautiful. Her raw ambition and ruthlessness cut her features into hard planes. That bony crown did not soften her, but seemed to sharpen those qualities about his elder sister. Is that how she sensed me so easily? What can that do? What is it? And how did she get such a thing? Flattery is always so thick on your tongue, Raelif, that I wonder if you can ever speak a bad word, she smiled. Considering how he had nearly sliced Arcassan's head off with his words earlier, he would have had to say yes. He could say a bad word. He had just watched himself with her most of the time. What brings you here? He asked casually, as if this were a meeting on a usual street, as if they weren't both trespassers here. Unless she is with Vex. Maybe she convinced him that she was not behind the plot to unseat him from the throne. It makes sense that he did not travel all the way here alone. Is not Ilithor a perfect place for a family reunion? She lightly began to glide down the steps. Our home. Our rightful home. Her red eyes were not on him as she said the last, but were, once again, gazing out at the city as she had when he'd first spied her with a sense of utter satisfaction. He remembered his own feeling of drunkenness in the city. Was she experiencing the rush of power that he had? Of course she was. But she wouldn't have pushed it away, but reveled in it. He hoped it was dulling her a little bit. Are you with King Vex? He asked as she drew nearer. He resisted the urge to run. It was useless. She'd strike him down the moment his back was turned and he'd taken a step. Lament desperately wanted to appear in his hand, but he kept it at bay. Her eyes suddenly left the city and sharpened on him. No longer were they dulled by wonder. Our uncle. Does she not know he's here? Interesting. Yes, Hera, our uncle, the Night King. He's here. Raelif smiled back at her, but he made his smile easy and relaxed, as if he was with Vex himself. That might buy me some time here. So that is how you found your way to Ilithor, she murmured as she continued to walk down the steps towards him. Of course it is. You wouldn't have found this city any other way. He let the insult slide off of him, and he didn't correct her. In a way, she was right. He was here because of their uncle. Let her think they were boon companions. You said that this was the temple worshipping the hunter. He made that into a question. She nodded. Yes, the forever hunt. And his prey? She nodded towards the stag, who looked ready to leap off its plinth and take off. Our uncle is so interesting, is he not? To allow a religion based upon his death to exist in the heart of Illithor. Raelif blinked, but then he remembered what Helgrim had told him and Aquilin about the two meanings of the song. That's only if you believe our uncle is the stag. She paused in her descent. A flicker of something went through her eyes. I heard you fled, brother. But you went to Vex yourself, did you? Threw yourself at his feet as you so wanted to do even as a child? Somehow got him to spare you? Another blink. She meant that time Vex had gestured for him to come to him, the time he'd just been thinking of. His memory expanded of that moment, and he recalled that Hera had been standing beside him when he'd taken that step towards Vex. Her eyes had flickered between them when Vex had called to him. Her mouth had flattened into a thin line, and she'd smiled when he'd moaned in pain at their mother's too rough grip. You make it sound as if being loyal to our king is a weakness. He laughed, but uneasily. He had run away. That she didn't know his true fate meant what? That she had fled too? Maybe right after him, and one of their parents. He couldn't ask her that or risk exposing that he had left the Kindreth when she had. You've always wanted to hide in his shadow, Raelif. Well, there are those of us who wish to step outside of it, she answered. She was now only 3 steps above him. They'd been at striking distance magically from the first time she'd spoken. But now, if they struck at each other, there would be no room for error. If either of them missed a hand movement, flubbed a syllable, zigged right when they should have zagged left, it would likely be a fatal blow. I wonder how many people have said something similar over the millennia, Hera. Probably too many to count, he said softly and wearily. Were you in on the original plot to overthrow him, or did losing everything just push you over into this madness? Her red eyes flared hot crimson. How dare— No! How dare you! He snapped. The anger came from out of nowhere and also out of countless hurts. But it surprised her, and him, if he were honest. I want to hear the extent of your idiocy. Tell me, now. Why does it matter? He sees me as a traitor either way, she said. Yes, he knew that. He was in the same boat, and yet it doesn't matter if you've decided to betray him now, Raelif realized. If you seek to go against him at this moment, then whether or not you were innocent in the past is irrelevant. But if you were innocent back then, he doesn't make that distinction, brother. Doesn't he? He was asking it rhetorically. He had been so certain he knew the answer. Maybe he still was, but maybe he just hoped for something different. I am a Vex, same as him. My blood is the same as his. My magic will be as powerful. You will see. She stared at him. I found the city. It appeared for me. He laughed. He couldn't help himself. He laughed right in her face. It wasn't what she was saying or her foolishness for saying it, but out of the grief he felt for everything suddenly. Why are you laughing, brother? Her voice dipped into the Arctic zone. Because, he laughed bitterly, because only you would think that. No, actually, you're not the only one. You're just the first of many fools who had stumbled into something and believed it was destiny. For a moment, he saw Vex in his mind, sitting on his throne, staring at him, smiling and waggling his eyebrows, wanting his youngest nephew to come near. Vex extended a hand towards him in his mind. In his memory, though, it seemed as real now. Would he take that hand? Would he? You have a choice now, Raelif, her voice lowered. You can take my side against him. The two of us could take him down, especially with what I've found here. Again, she touched that crown. You've no idea the power here, the possibilities. It's all ours for the taking. We are Vexes. Maybe before he had met Aquilin, he would have taken her offer. And even though he now believed he had lost Aquilin and was likely in Vex's crosshairs, he found he still did not want it. Besides, he considered himself a citizen of the Arave Empire, a kindred, true, but he was a representative. He would not dishonor that. And oddly, he kept seeing Vex's smile. Vex is our uncle. He is our king. He is the only king the Kindred will ever truly have. This is his city, and these are his things. We can only play dress up in them, Rayleigh told her. Her expression became thunderous. You fool! You still want to play it safe. You still don't want to choose a side. But she was wrong, for he had, and now he would find out if he had made a terrible mistake, at least in saying what he had before backing away. Hera, he said, even as he called lament to his right hand and the power of the void to his left. I wish we had never met here. The blood weapon sliced through the air even as he pulled all his magic to shield him. It swung towards her neck and it stopped, a millimeter away from it. No matter what he did, Rayleigh could not move the sword, nor could he strike with his magic. He was completely frozen in place. That damned crown must have given her powers that put her well above him. He glared up at his sister. Except it wasn't Hera. His uncle was smiling down at him. How interesting. Finley was right. I do so hope he lives for me to congratulate him on his keen observational skills regarding you, dear nephew. Do you like epic length vampire stories? If so, I have a recommendation for you, and that's my Everdark series. It starts when two friends enter an eternal vampire realm, driven explorer Julian and skeptical Christian. With his mortal blood, bold Julian awakens the most powerful vampire of all, ancient vampire King Daemon, asleep for millennia in an abandoned tomb, who now walks the earth once more and desires Julian as his immortal beloved. Logical Christian never believed in vampires, but after one nearly kills him, he too is no longer an ordinary human. His vampire savior, exiled Lord Balthazar Ravenscroft, can have anyone he desires, but he only seems to want Christian's love. This story is completed in many forms. The 147-chapter web serial is archived on wraithbrain.com. The audiobooks and book series are available on my own shop, Amazon, Kobo, and a lot of other third-party retailers. And there's a free podcast as well. If you want to read the written story, the first book is free from the Wraithbrain shop. I'll post links to everything in the notes.